This is The Last of Us podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about The Last of Us finale, episode 9, Look for the Light.
Maybe there's nothing bad out there, but so far there's always been something bad out there.
We're still here, though.
I know. I'm only saying there's risk. We don't have to do this. I want you to know that.
What do you mean? What else are we supposed to do?
Nothing. We just go back to Tommy's. We forget about the whole damn thing.
After all we've been through. Everything I've done. It can't be for nothing. I know you mean well. I know you want to protect me. You have. And when we're done, we'll go wherever you want. Tommy's, Sheep Ranch, the moon. I'll follow you anywhere you go. But there's no halfway with this. We finish what we started.
Welcome back, fellow survivors, for the last ever time. We are The Last of Us, you are The Last of Us. This is The Last of Us podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about the finale, episode 9, Look for the Light. I am blinded by the light. I am Chris, and I am joined by my fellow co-hosts.
Yes, I'm one of your co-hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow survivors. I'm your third and final co-host, John.
Excellent. And the good thing is, Chris, despite your slight change to the intro, this is not the final ever time we'll be talking about The Last of Us. It has been announced that we are getting more Last of Us, but we have a little quote from Craig Mason, the showrunner, as a start off to the episode.
Excellent. Yes, Craig Mason, basically in the Times this week, basically had the following quote about the next season. There are only two main Last of Us games. The stories in the second game are much bigger and more complicated, so we wouldn't do just one more season, Mason said. But I have no interest in never-ending dramas. I write towards endings.
All good things there.
Yes. So we are going to get multiple. So there is a second game. It is a fair bit chunkier. Mm-hmm. And additionally, when they add in stories like Bill and Frank to expand upon the universe, or not expand upon the universe, expand upon the characters that were in stories kind of there already, we're going to extend that out. So yeah, it's like changing a kind of fully formed 40-hour game into 10-hour TV show seasons. Makes sense?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's good. It's good to hear. Like, this was quite a specific story that was being told in the first season, and they have nailed it in the 9 episodes. Nailed exactly what was in that. Nothing really cut out that you would really have wanted to keep. Let's say. Whereas the second season, I think they'll be moving around the story quite a bit and telling the story that they have there, because it's much bigger. So it's a much bigger world that they're exploring in the second season. Yeah. So I can see how they could stretch that to 2, maybe even 3 seasons. But I do love the additional comment from Mason that he is not a person that's going to be writing 12 seasons of The Walking Dead from this story. He's here and will get to an ending, but wants to serve the story as best he can.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Again, it's just like, if the story calls for it, great. The story doesn't call for it, fine. And again, the reason that it usually takes so long is because people die a lot in the game.
Exactly.
That's some great news. Yes, I did make some jokes around The Last of Us in the last time, but no, we will be back for season 2 whenever that approaches. But we're here to talk about the season 1 finale. And before we get into this episode, remember our final World Ends pub quiz question will be up later in this episode. If you gather together the answer to all 9 questions, email it to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. You can be in with a chance to get your hands on The Last of Us Part 1 on PlayStation 5 or PC, because PC is coming out soon as well. Yeah. So if you have watched the ending of the season and are interested in going, I wonder how that played in the game, well, you too can find out. We will not get you a PS5, we will not get you a PC, but we will get you The Last of Us Part 1 on PlayStation 5 or PC. If you don't have either of those, you're not interested, we'll get there'll be a comparable kind of Last of Us themed goodies.
A basket of mushrooms.
There you go.
Yes.
Yes. Just giving away a basket of
Oysters,
mushrooms.
shiitake, just there. Magic. No magic mushrooms will be provided with with any goodies.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Yeah, just gather together the 9 answers, email us that email address. If you haven't gotten all the questions, you can pop on over to the website at tvpodcastindustries.com. Click on the pub quiz button in the top corner and you'll see both of these sets of questions for the pub quizzes that are going on at the moment.
Yes. And for an extra chance to be in with that as well, don't forget you can head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Take your old screenshot, email it, that screenshot to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com and you get an extra chance. You know, always worth being in it because you got to be in it to win it.
Exactly.
But gentlemen, with all that said and done, let's jump into our discussion on this episode because there's a lot to go through. First up, Derek, do you want to tell us who gave us what, where, when and how with this episode details?
Absolutely. The show, of course, is based on the PlayStation game written by Neil Druckmann and directed by Bruce Straley from game publisher Naughty Dog. The executive producers and writers for the show are Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, who are the writers of this episode, of course. They have written the finale together. And this episode was directed once again by Ali Abbasi, who directed episode 8.
Very good.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for The Last of Us episode 9, Look to the Light?
Sure. About 14 years ago, Ellie's mother Anna is bitten by an infected attacker as she gives birth to Ellie. She's found by Marlene, who hesitantly takes Ellie and, at Anna's request, shoots her to prevent her from turning. In the present, Joel and Ellie make their way to Salt Lake City, Utah to find the hospital where Ellie's condition will be assessed to see if a cure against the cordyceps infection is possible. Making their way through the city, Joel confides in Ellie that after his daughter died, he tried and failed to end his life, but doesn't feel that way anymore. As they share some terrible puns, a Firefly patrol captures Ellie and knocks Joel unconscious. After he awakens in a hospital, Marlene explains to him that doctors are preparing Ellie for surgery to produce a cure, but the procedure will kill her. Marlene orders Joel to be taken away. However, as he is being escorted from the hospital, he fights back, and racing to save Ellie kills most of the soldiers and the lead surgeon. Joel finds Ellie and carries her unconscious from the hospital. But Marlene intercepts him, stating there is still time to find a cure, but reasoning that Marlene will always be following Ellie, Joel shoots and kills her. Waking up on the backseat of a car, Joel lies to Ellie, telling her the Fireflies had found other immune people, but were unable to create a cure. As they hike the final leg of their return journey to Jackson, Ellie confides to Joel that the person she had to kill was Riley, her best friend, who was also bitten at the same time as Ellie. She insists Joel swear his story about the Fireflies is true. He swears, and Ellie seemingly accepts his word.
Or does she? That is what we're going to discuss. Well, no, actually, we're going to discuss many points. But we are going to change it up a bit for those who have been following us for our feedback and our moments and all of our discussions for this season. We usually kind of opened with pretty much kind of like the cold open, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But we're not going to kind of, and that would be a point where all of us would come in. But we're going to shake things up because it is the finale. We also want to give a bit of thoughts on overall on the whole season as it wraps up. So, John, do you want to take us away with your first point? And we'll see how that kind of takes us for the rest of this episode.
Yes, effectively my point is the opening. It's the birth of Ellie to her mother Anna. I think the first thing really want to shout out on this part is, that Anna here is played by Ashley Johnson, who voices Ellie in the game. And it was really distinctive hearing that voice, actually.
Nice, wasn't it?
For sure.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased that they're involving, the different voice actors from the game in this TV show. I think it's really good, to be honest, that they're doing that.
Yeah,
so that's
4 of them majorly involved in this season. We've had the voice actor for Tommy. We had obviously the voice actor for Joel last week. We've had Marlene, of course, playing the role of Marlene in the show. And now we have Ashley Johnson coming in as the mother of Ellie. Which,
so I think it's really positive, that kind of approach to
and
things.
And she's great here as well.
Yeah,
I think,
she is.
I think some of our Marvel fans might recognize her as the waitress from the Avengers, who everybody thought was going to become the new partner of Captain America, because she kind of sort of chats him up in that one scene that she was in. But I know we have a lot of Marvel listeners to TV podcast industry, so you may recognize for her from that role in there, but mostly known as a voice actor for the last 20 or 30 years.
But yeah, I mean, like
20 years. Sorry, maybe sound much older than she was there, but I bet the last 20 years.
But like, I really enjoyed this opening. I like the context that it provides. I mean, I don't really recall from the game. Certainly, this wasn't in there.
It wasn't.
And in fact, to begin with, I assumed that they were running from the lakeside town where they had come out of the restaurant from the previous one. I thought it was almost like just a carry on from that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And I think just because of the voice, I was thinking, oh, maybe it still is. But then, you know, you see it's around 14 years beforehand, and this is the mother of Ellie, who's heavily pregnant, running away from an infected. And I think, I think there was a lot of this that was, you know, both, it was horrific, but really kind of tender and sweet. It was kind of really, those two sides of the coin, really. And I thought it was done so well, you know, from sort of getting the knife and preparing to sort of fend off this infected to the shock of her having given birth in that moment.
Absolutely.
But also to some point, sort of, I guess what I've been saying, you know, we haven't seen that thing where someone's been bitten on the hand, say, and immediately someone's gone to take the arm off with an axe or something, like you would see in a normal, you know, zombie kind of TV show or movie, or you would see that. Here, in a sense, Anna has that thought in terms of cutting the umbilical cord, you know, before it takes hold in the bloodstream, but it is after she's been bitten, so it's not entirely, but as is always the case with that, chop off the arm, you know, to stop the spread of the infection. And even that she's not going to nurse her, so because of that. But she does then effectively lie to Marlene to say that she had cut the cord before the bite from the infected.
Exactly.
And so again, this is here explaining to some extent her immunity to the cordyceps infection, as effectively Anna is bitten before she cuts the umbilical cord on Ellie.
Yes.
And you hear it later in the hospital that Ellie effectively already has the cordyceps in her brain. But it gives the signal that
she is already cordyceps
to cordyceps or infected. So she, in a sense, has grown up with it. It's been, so her body, it's almost symbiotic in the case of aggressive, and parasitic in this sense. You have, I think, just Ashley Johnson playing a wonderful part here with Anna. I think, you know, that moment, I really enjoyed the close up of baby Ellie to Anna. Like, it was really beautiful.
It was.
It felt really touching, you know, in a moment that actually almost feels it's certainly hopeless for Anna, but she's just given birth to her daughter after being bitten and knowing that she's going to turn, and yet there's this really sweet moment between the two of them. Absolutely. In this kind of fairly drastic moment.
I just love that as the baby's crying in the new mother's face, effectively, Anna's saying to her, you tell the world, you tell them, Ellie, you tell them, you shout it at all of them as well. You know, she's got that kind of, you know, she knows this child is going to be a fighter. Absolutely right, that she is as well.
Yeah.
Where do they get these babies? That's the one thing in production I'm so curious. Like, that looks like a pretty newborn baby.
It is, yeah.
And I'm like, that
nice.
wasn't CGI or kind of prosthetic or
No.
kind of automaton or anything. That was a real baby.
It was actually two real babies, and a little boy and a little girl, who were used for this role. It's on the official podcast. They talked about it, and Craig Mazin politely says it was much better working with a girl, slightly better actor, and also we didn't have to CGI any of its business.
Oh yeah, that would make more sense. Yeah,
so which I thought was quite funny.
I will talk very quickly about this. I was happy we got to know where the knife came from. Like that
exactly.
It's a very nice keepsake that has been continued.
Yeah.
Some people have blankets, some people have teddies, photographs. Ellie has a knife.
In this world, you need a knife.
Makes sense. Yeah. The one thing is one of Marlene's, I was going to say goons, but no, soldiers.
Yeah.
Probably freedom fighters. Marlene turns around and goes, cover her ears, and walks in. Mm-hmm. Does the man cover her ears? No, he does not.
No, he does not.
And Ellie is half deaf.
And screams her way through the whole rest of the encounter there. Yeah.
I was laughing at some of these. This is cool. For me, this is way more information. And I enjoyed the explanation of kind of where she came from. Again, I'm a huge Critical Role fan, so Ashley Johnson is one of the founding members of Critical Role, which is a kind of D&D live role playing. She's also had a fantastic run on Blind Spot, so she's been around for years, as you said, and is a well-known actress. This is a bit kismet in that we saw last week Troy Baker, kind of his performance. Yeah. Again, these are the people who initially brought their soul to the characters within the video games and multiple video games now. Then seeing here, and I think Craig Mason said it either online or an interview, one of them, essentially that they struck gold with Ashley Johnson being Ellie, and she embodied the character, and the character became Ashley, and that character became entwined.
Yeah.
And then somehow they managed to replicate that a second time with Bella Ramsey, and it made sense then to say, well, Ellie is as much entwined with Ashley Johnson's Ellie that actually you could have them together and be like mother and daughter. And then I don't know whether, and I'm going to have to listen to the official podcast and see if they talk about that. But the assumption is that just made sense. And when you do see it, there is, Bella Ramsey has some of those same mannerisms, which would make sense then that it's mother-daughter, because they both embodied the same character for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the most interesting things. If you look at screenshots of the game of Ellie, you probably don't see the likeness as much with Bella Ramsey, but seeing Bella Ramsey and Ashley Johnson together, you can really see there's a similarity between the two of them, weirdly, even though this is not Ashley Johnson playing Ellie, but it's really interesting to see the similarity between the two of them. It's great that they brought her on board here. And again, I do want to point out, I already mentioned that Marlene is played by the same actress in game and in the TV show. Really cool that the scene that Ashley Johnson is here for is working with Marlene. So really cool that both of those actors get to work together again, Merle Dandridge at the beginning of the season, coming back for the end of the season, and now having an episode working with Ashley Johnson at the beginning as well is quite cool.
Yeah. And that's the other side of this is Marlene and Anna's relationship. They've known each other forever. I mean, you see Marlene being a little wary of taking the baby.
Absolutely.
But it's being forced on, and then worry about shooting Anna. Yeah. But ultimately makes that decision. So, you see the linkages as to why Bella was there.
Yeah.
It's Marlene that's put her into the Fedra training system in order to gather skills, as we heard when we saw the episode with Ellie and Riley, about it almost being a training ground for the Fireflies, not just Fedra, or at least for some specific, at least for Riley, possibly for Ellie as well. But
I kind of take that decision now of having seen the full season and seeing the story. The story wasn't as clear in the game as you remember, John. I kind of take this decision as saying Marlene's willing to do whatever is necessary to do the right thing or to do what she believes is right. She's being asked to take care of Ellie, and she believes the right place to keep her best friend's child safe is with her enemies, and she's willing to put her in with Fedra and just keep an eye on her. But I believe that is another one of the choices that she would make that a lot of other people wouldn't. She would kind of go, there's no way I'm putting that child in with my enemies. But this feels like Marlene's making another big choice that other people may not make, as we probably see later on in the episode and talk about later on in the episode, some of the choices that she makes that other people might not make.
Well, that's it. And you also get the feeling that Marlene doesn't quite believe Anna's story, she had managed to cut the umbilical cord before being attacked and bitten.
Exactly. So I was trying to think about this afterwards. Either the infection obviously happening in the leg and traveling to her womb is a very short trip, and we've heard, the infection travels in a couple of minutes. When the bite happens in the neck, the infection goes to the head very quickly. It's like 15 minutes, I think, was what it was saying at the start of the season. When someone gets bitten on the leg, it takes a day or so to turn. So I was wondering if that was the reason why it passed so quickly through the umbilical cord, and because Anna doesn't cut the umbilical cord quickly enough, did it go there? Or is it simply she used that exact same knife to kill the cordyceps in the infected that was attacking, and then used the knife to cut it? So has she almost doubled the possibility that it went through the umbilical cord into Ellie, that by almost trying to save her, has she actually added to the cordyceps? I think it's more likely that it's just traveled from the leg into the womb that quickly, because it seems that conversion happens very quickly.
Yeah.
But
it's one that will never, they won't explain. I think we've got the most detail and explanation of her immunity.
Yeah, and it's certainly more explanation than we've ever gotten in any show about how people changed, what causes it, all that kind of stuff. We've gotten a lot of that throughout the season. They've been willing to give explanations for everything. And as to John's point earlier on, none of this is in the game. There's literally one note from Ellie's mother, Anna, which refers to the fact that she's known Marlene all her life, and that's about it, and says, take care of yourself, that she was already dying. So fan theory was that she was dying of cordyceps, and that's what has transferred it to Ellie. That's the story that's now been confirmed in the show.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, so I think that's everything for me for that whole section around Ellie's birth. Yeah.
I've got one tiny note on this one.
Go on.
I was going to leave it for notes, but it makes more sense here. Just think it's a lovely touch. The song that Anna is singing to Ellie when Marlene comes in is an Aha song. It's a song called The Sun Always Shines on TV, one of my favourites from the 80s. But why that's important is that Ellie absolutely loves Aha. It's something that comes out in her character throughout the first and second game. It's one of those bands that, while she was born way later than the 80s, it's one of those bands that their music has always transferred to her. We hear her playing versions of Aha on guitar in the future. So I like that her mother's singing another Aha song to her. So another little connection between the two characters.
Excellent.
Very cute.
Yes.
Very cute.
There you go.
Chris, what's your top moment from the episode?
Let's all go to the No. Was it the ballpark? There you go.
It's a different song, Chris.
It's a completely different song. I've never claimed that I know songs or have a musical bone in my body.
Let's go out to the ball game. And it definitely.
Let's all go to the ball game.
And a
there
different tune.
That's that one. Yes, there you go.
That's also played at baseball games, but again, different tune.
Okay. But
it's okay.
Fellow survivors, this is as close as I'll ever get to that. But yeah, I want to talk about an overall important part of this story, which is the arrival in Salt Lake, the ball game, the park, I should say, when most importantly the giraffes. Now I finally understand the giraffes, and then the confession that comes from Joel as he's trying to engage Ellie more. I bring her out of the pit of despair, if you want to call it that, she's found herself in following the events of last episode.
Yeah.
Because again, 21 times machete to the head does something to a kid.
Absolutely. And not even just that, what was happening beforehand. The David the paedophile attacking her, and then what she had to do, both elements definitely weighing on her mind as this episode starts. One thing that's not really clear here, because we just had the flashback to Anna at the start, and then it cuts to Ellie and Joel. One thing, I think it's important, last episode started in winter, and we had a massive winter storm. Now they're in Utah. So this is quite a while since they were at the lakeside resort. It's at least a few weeks to months on, and Ellie is still very quiet, still dragging her heels, not even able to hear Joel when he's speaking to her because she's so absorbed in her own thoughts.
Yeah, and that was a nice touch from the director on that one, just to kind of put you in Ellie's mind, essentially, and just kind of block out all audio. Did think I lost audio for a split second.
Like, what just happened?
Like, what just, no! This was fun. This was really interesting to get into the psyche of the character who is going through stuff. And you really start to see how essentially Joel is trying to draw her out with Boggle and kind of Chef Boyardee.
Chef Boyardee, yes.
Yes.
Tasty.
But essentially they do, as they slowly get into Salt Lake, you're seeing that this has happened for a while. Like, now Joel is at the end of their journey. Joel is the one essentially kind of trying to pull information and conversation from Ellie, and she's the stoic one.
Yeah.
Which is the flip of episode 1, essentially. Episode 2.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the story.
Yeah, when they started traveling together, Joel wouldn't have a conversation with her. Ellie wouldn't shut up no matter what. She would ask questions about every single thing that was going on. And you can see Joel's almost at stream of consciousness level. And that's why, I suppose, if you realize that there has been a gap in time between when they're at Lakeside and when they're here in Salt Lake City, Joel's been trying this for weeks at this stage to try and raise her and to try and get a conversation back out of her.
Yeah, we do start to see some hope when they get to in Salt Lake City, and when they get to this, what can only be described as the most video game mechanic, where you have a ledge and you have to hoist someone up so they can drop a ladder to you and you can climb up.
It's a classic, yes.
Yeah. It's in every video game, every major kind of action adventure, Uncharted, like you name it, you name the third person action, it's there.
And certainly one that's originated really with Naughty Dog. This is something that they always had in these types of missions. Always send off Joel always sends off Ellie to knock down ladders for him. So certainly they are well known for it as well. It's not just a one-off mechanic. This happens about every 15 minutes when you're playing the game. So can't work out how to get past the next puzzle, send Ellie off to get the ladder down. That's basically it, yeah.
And this is a fun change on that, which is, and it's actually straight from the video game, seemingly. I've seen like the side-by-side comparison where she drops it. But for those new to this, for those kind of not understanding, you think something is wrong. Like she's just constantly just around the corner, just passing the corner as Joel rushes after her. And you're like, oh no, she's seen someone's dying, something's wrong, she's about to get eaten by a clicker or hulking swall clicker or a runner, you name the new breed. And it's not, it's something beautiful. It's life.
Yeah. Life
finds a way in the way of Jeff Goldblum. You find a herd. I'm pretty sure it's probably an army or some weird name, but it's essentially a herd of giraffe walking around a ballpark. And it's cool.
It really is, isn't it? It's a fantastic moment, and right when you need it as well. You know,
well, that's it. It's almost the therapy of it for Ellie as well. You know, I like the fact that she almost gives out to Joel to say, don't scare it away, but he gives her the plant so that she can actually then feed it. And there's a therapy there with this giraffe, which I thought was really good, because we see how she's not dealing with what happened at Lakeside. So this is this moment of light, effectively this bright moment, that she's had in a couple of weeks, say.
Yeah.
And it's tonic for her soul, to the point where they have the conversation sort of looking out across the ballpark, where, she repeats the line from episode 2 that Joel says, where you can't deny that view. And as they look across Salt Lake City in this instance, rather than Boston.
Yeah. I think it was Ellie in Boston that said the same line, but yeah, it's repeated from episode 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just an absolutely beautiful moment with with looking out over the group of giraffes that are now running around this baseball park. I think that's really cool. The understanding here is that they have broken out somehow from the zoo, from the local zoo effectively, and have now taken on Salt Lake City as if it's their new tundra.
Oh, I just thought they were all Mormons. Mormon giraffes.
Mormon giraffes.
That's how it works.
That could be it. Yeah. That could be it. But as you say, John, it comes at exactly the right moment. It's the moment that Ellie needs it. It's the moment that Joel is really trying to reconnect with Ellie, and it comes along just at the right time, so they can now start to reconnect together.
Yeah. Then the confession happens, and then that starts to twist something, and you can see it in their performance, and you see him well up. Again, Pedro Pascal really knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Kind of just with this broken man whose heart is mending over time, and he's finding his wholeness there.
Well, it's that willingness to talk about Sarah as well. And, it's just that sort of beginnings as they're going through the sort of the temporary medical center, where he just begins to open up about Sarah as well,
Yeah, exactly. And what happened to him? He'd lied originally about this scar that he had in his head, saying someone tried to shoot at him. He missed shooting back. And then it turns out that his story of what actually happened is very close to that, but actually the person shooting at him was himself, and he did miss.
Yeah.
He doesn't know why. He has no idea why. And I love that Ellie thinks that the moral, I suppose, of the story that Joel is saying is time heals all wounds. And again, as you say, Chris, a beautiful performance from Pedro Pascal when he says it isn't time. Looking at Ellie, he can tell that he could have gone for another 40 years living his life, and that wound of the loss of Sarah would never have healed. It's only by someone as strong as Ellie being by his side that he's now feeling like he's finally whole again.
No. And it's all capped beautifully with some puns.
Of course. Of course.
Because they're just amazing.
And these two would never say, I love you, I know, or anything like that. You are my dad, and you're my daughter. They'd never say anything approximating a true line of I love you between the two of them. It would have to be the real acceptance that puns are actually a great form of humour is enough for Ellie to know that he cares for her.
Yeah. And then that does get closed with the flashbang. And there's a brief second I thought,
is that a grenade?
I don't know what I thought. There's a brief second where I'm like, oh God, they've got to now get through raiders, kill the raiders, escape, and then get to the doctors. I'm like, oh my God, we're running out of time here, folks. And then that's not it. Obviously it brings it to kind of this section or kind of point to a close. It's all beautifully handled. Very, very well written. Dramatically well written.
Yeah.
And I do worry, this is worry, quote unquote. It's not an actual worry. But will Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal will this performance be Emmy optional in the future? Because we're now so far away from the Emmys.
Yeah. Kind
of later in the year. Will this be remembered? Because we talk every now and again about these kind of, my God, Critics' Choice, Emmy Award winning potential. And I can see, this should be up there. If Game of Thrones was up there and won a few times, this 100% should be.
Yeah.
I do fear now we're on the wrong side of the summer for it to be fully remembered and considered because you do get recency bias. But for me, this show has performantly delivered on the acting and storylines. Like, still one of my best episodes of TV ever is the Frank and Bill episode. And like, that's 100% going to be forever live with me. This confession from a father to a surrogate daughter about how they are feeling for each other, and just this short bit of a scene, you could clip that out and really show some. Now you miss some of the context around it, but it's just the delivery of these scenes. The scene.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And I know exactly what you're saying. And I suppose it's one of those things. There's shows that have had one season and been remembered forever. There's shows that have to have, 6 or 7 seasons, like Game of Thrones. It's a really well-known show, but that first season had very low viewership. It built over time. This show has built every episode to now become one of the biggest shows of HBO. So if they didn't know what they had at the beginning of this season, a video game turned into a TV show, if they didn't think they would have a success from it, they absolutely have had a success from it by the end of the season. So I would suspect that HBO will put this up for Emmy consideration next year. Things win awards, that have been out for the full year from the last Emmys.
They do.
And it's up to the studio themselves or the TV channel themselves to keep pushing that and keeping it in the minds of people in the industry. It's going to be another 2 years before we get a second season of Last of Us. So, maybe they'll align it differently the next time they release it, if that's specifically what they're looking for. But I think it's likely that we'll see, at least some participation from the major cast here and the show itself, in that, because I think the way HBO works themselves, they only have 5 or 6 major shows per year, which is probably quite a lot for most people. But I think this is probably going to be considered, at the end of this year, it's probably still going to be considered a massive show. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. So
let's hope so, because they deserve it. It was nice seeing Pedro Pascal at the Oscars the other night, and going, in a couple more years, he's probably going to be accompanying Bella Ramsey there to collect her Oscar for whatever movie she's going to be getting that for in the future, because they're both fantastic. So they've done such a great job here. Good stuff. Good points, Chris. That's
thank you.
It's a good section of the show. I'm going to take the final section, really. In the hospital.
Way it should be.
Yeah, like this is the finale of the show, and I think, some people would come in, this game's been out for 10 years, the story has been out there for 10 years, and I think a lot of people come into the series thinking they know how the show is going to play out. And it all comes down to a choice at the end. And I think what was so controversial about this game when it came out was, would you make the same choice as Joel? And the game serviced that, the TV shows serviced that choice of him, but it is the big question, I suppose, will be, if you were a viewer of this show, do you think Joel made the right choice or not? We find out as he meets Marlene, who we haven't seen since the second episode, and she had her injury at that point. So not too sure whether you expected Marlene to come back at all, Chris, at the end of the season. I think it's one of those ones that's supposed to be a little bit of a surprise, that she pops back up and she's still the leader of the Fireflies here, and she's waiting for them on the other side of the country. It's supposed to be a surprise here, but the fact that she has made this decision for Ellie has taken her away. She's already in surgery when Joel wakes up from being knocked out by the patrol unit. So it's out of his hands. As far as she's concerned, the decision is made. Thanks very much. Off on the road now. She was only cargo anyway. You're only doing it, for the payment that I offered to you at the beginning. So, you might as well leave now. I've made the decision. Whereas she doesn't know what we know. She doesn't know what's happened between the two of them, and that he is now considering her the closest person in his life. So he's not willing to accept what's happened here. And what is happening, what's happening with Ellie herself, is that she's being prepared for a surgery that could potentially save the world. We get much more of an explanation here from Marlene, that the cordyceps are inside, why cordyceps don't see Ellie as being infected, and that there is a very good chance that there will be a cure created from her, but it will kill Ellie. There's no doubt about that. Whatever happens, Ellie will have to sacrifice herself, whether a cure is made or not. she will
yeah,
die.
they're taking out her brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're basically taking out her brain and slicing into itty-bitty parts while they, like, figure out how to replicate the signal.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting... The fun part of the topic this brings is the value of one person's life valuable enough to warrant that their death on the chance, on the potential for the world's vaccine to a problem. I find it super interesting now, this topic, than probably when it originally came out in a post-COVID world.
Okay.
Knowing that a lot of people probably, not a lot, some people probably wouldn't even still take the vaccine, even when it's been decided.
Probably true.
But again, different topic for a different time.
Yeah. But
it's, would you as a father sacrifice your daughter or son? Like, would you sacrifice your, in this case now, the new pseudo kind of daughter? Like, in that it's not actually his daughter, but he has now, throughout this months of journey, kind of grown so attached that he does see her that way now.
And Joel has literally said to her, in the last 20 years, I've never found anybody that's made me feel whole and complete after the death of my daughter. You're the first person that's done that. I can now heal my wounds. He is literally saying to her, she is the most important thing in his life. Yeah. And I suppose that's the other element, the other part of your question. It's, does one person's life outweigh the world's life? That's not really the question here, because what Joel says is find somebody else. He doesn't say nobody should sacrifice their lives for the rest of the world. He says Ellie's not sacrificing her life for the rest of the world. That's not happening. She's not dying. So he's not weighing up any other person in the world. He's weighing Ellie versus the rest of the world.
And he's weighing up him as well.
Him as well, absolutely.
Because that is what Ellie brings for him. Mm-hmm. So there's that selfishness there. I mean, it's interesting that Marlene says, of all the people I never wanted to owe, it's you, Joel. Yeah. But I owe you big time. Like, in a sense, Marlene probably has the measure of Joel.
100%. Yeah.
And so she is not happy to be in a place where she owes him anything.
Yeah.
But she does.
And I think with us spending as much time as we have with Joel, I think until this scene, I don't think even we as the audience know what Joel's really like. We've heard stories of it. We've heard Tommy mention it. We've heard Tommy's wife as well, Maria, had talked about it when they were in Jamestown as well, that the stories that she'd heard about what Joel had done before meeting Ellie, or before we'd seen on screen, let's say, were massively violent. He'd killed, brutalized innocent people to stay alive, effectively. Yeah. We'd not really seen that on screen. I think the only opportunity we would have seen that would have been if Joel had gotten to David before Ellie killed him. I would say you would probably seen a very brutal.
Well, I think
Joel
last week's
there.
episode, the interrogation of the
two guys, some indication. But as Joel is escorted out, we see him turning and taking out every single person in his way to get to Ellie. We see him brutally murder people who are putting down their weapons and asking to be freed. You know, we do see exactly how far Joel's willing to go.
Does it confirm Joel was special forces or just army?
Actually, it was Tommy that was in the army, because we saw the sticker at the beginning of the season, so everybody thought that was on Joel's truck, but actually you hear that Tommy was the one that went off to the army, and Joel always thought that was a bit weird because he was just a bit of a joiner. That's why Tommy went off and did that. So no, Joel was never in the army.
Okay. I also think just with those gun skills, you know. But I suppose it's Texas.
I think it's 20 years in the apocalypse staying alive.
Yeah. A big point I just want to bring in, and the big point makes me side with Joel. And I know I'm kind of planting my flag here a bit. Ellie wasn't given the choice. Ellie wasn't consulted. Marlene says it, she'll never know. She's just going to be put asleep.
Yeah.
So I think if it would have been different if they presented this to Joel and Ellie, as a choice, going like, you...
Yeah.
Like, I think the whole point is, like, you could make it's your choice. Like, if you decide this, he would leave and he'd be happy. But he's essentially someone going, we think by killing your daughter, we may be able to do it, but we're not going to tell her, we're just going to let her go to sleep. And that's it. And they're just going to put her to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And instead, they don't. So, yeah, he's kind of protecting his own. It's like, essentially, the whole, we talk about it, the kind of the genre now, lone wolf in a cub style.
Uh-huh.
He is that lone wolf who now has a cub again.
Yeah.
He's going to do anything to protect that cub. And we see him go SWAT.
we do, but I will say the show doesn't hold back here. They're also giving you the counterpoints between that argument from Joel. Yes, absolutely right. Marlene did not give Ellie any kind of choice. Took her out. That could have been the last words that were ever said to her. But Joel also lies to her and doesn't give her any choice whatsoever in whether she will save the world or not. I don't know whether it comes out really clearly in the show here, and it's not a big spoiler at all, but Joel 100% knows that the scientists feel with the death of Ellie, they would be able to create a vaccination or a cure for cordyceps.
Yeah, that doesn't come out in the show.
It's 100%
in the show,
clear.
it's a bit more, we think.
That's what they're saying to him. Agreed?
Yeah.
But Joel is convinced, even if a cure could be created for this, I'm not letting Ellie go. That's the choice he makes. He does not... He believes he has made the choice to save Ellie over creating a cure.
Yeah.
But he doesn't give her a choice, and that's what comes out later in the conversation. Yes. When she wakes up in the back of the car, the conversation from Joel is he creates this really flimsy cover story that suddenly raiders attacked and everybody died, but don't worry, I got you out of there. Oops, sorry, Marlene's dead as well. But they had already done tests on other people that were immune as well, and they couldn't find anything, so we're able to go, no problem at all, off to home with Tommy. So he's not giving her a choice.
No, he's not. And I think that's what's really good about this is that, you have the counterpoints between Joel and Marlene about having that choice. But Joel makes his choice and then also prevents Ellie from having, her choice in the matter of, so doing exactly the same as Marlene. I mean, possibly to some degree they are birds of a feather, they're kind of bedfellows.
Yeah.
But it's just not giving Ellie the choice. One results in her dead but possibly with a cure for cordyceps. And the other, is she's alive, but still hasn't been able to have her choice as to whether she would do this.
Yeah.
So it's really, I think it's just such a great sort of few moments, from when they get to the hospital to the cover story, all of this, it really sort of just murkies all the water.
Exactly.
And it murkies the water, or muddies the water, I should say, to almost between Joel and Ellie.
100%.
Now. At just after he feels he's got, as I say, a surrogate, or someone that can make him feel better. After the death of Sarah, right back in episode 1,
Yeah.
So it's almost like he just immediately undermines his own, happiness in a sense. Cause, you would think that he's now, well, he knows that a big, fat, juicy, stonking lie is out there. So he knows he's always got to kind of keep that, going.
Yeah. Cause he's effectively also told her your immunity is no longer as special as you thought it was, in a way. He's just moved her all the way from Boston to Utah, all the way across the country, saying that she's the cure for something. The conversation they had just after they saw the giraffes was, this has to mean something. We have to follow this through to the end. That's the choice that Ellie does make. She says, we're going to have to follow through to the end. I'll do whatever the doctors want me to do, and then we can go wherever you want, Joel. But that is her decision. That's what she says. Marlene may not have had that discussion with her, but Joel knows her intentions. So after he killed them all, he could have had that conversation in the car with her and said, do you know what? I took them out because you weren't given a choice, but you are still immune. You are still the only person with immunity. I've done bad things before. I did something else bad here. The choice is still back up to you. But he's almost taken away the future choice for her because of the lie that he's telling her here is that they have done experiments and have not been able to find a cure. But Joel, I think, believes that there is a cure that could have been found by killing Ellie.
Yeah. I am very interested to see where this goes. I think she finds out. Because I don't believe, like, the way they lingered on Bella Ramsey.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's close out that final discussion, how the episode ends, because it is another one that could be open to interpretation, and I'd like to hear what you thought. So as we've gone through this episode, we have closed out all of their stories. This moment earlier on where Joel reveals that he tried to kill himself after the death of his daughter Sarah, and then reveals that, you know, he is now saved because of Ellie. That kind of is Joel opening every single piece of himself up to Ellie. He's got no other real things hidden now. He's opening up all of his emotions to her. As the episode ends, after he's told her the lie in the car, after they get out and they go on their hike to Jamestown, Ellie then reveals the only other piece of her that Joel doesn't know. She reveals to him that she had to kill Riley, her best friend, which she had not revealed before. She'd said she killed someone before, but she never told Joel how important that person was to them, had not told the story of what happened, but she reveals that and then immediately asks him to swear that the story that he said was true. She immediately asks for him to double down on the lie that she, I think, knows Joel told her. Double down, you tell me, you swear to me that that's true. And then he lies to her again.
Yeah.
And the response that we get to close out the episode, the response that we get from her is sure. It's not, okay, I believe you. It's not, thanks for confirming. It's not a laugh and she reads a pun from her pun book. I think that look that we see on Ellie's face is Ellie going, not only did he lie to me before, he's lying to me now, and I gave him a final opportunity to tell me the truth.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I mean, I would be 100% with you on that. I think she absolutely is smelling something fishy here. I think even just waking up still in the medical gowns on the back seat, you can see even then as he's talking to her, you know, the fact that she turns away to sort of rest up. There's something that doesn't fit with what he's telling her. Even that Marlene would be there. And I mean, whilst Marlene may have not told her what the end result was, it's not to say that they didn't talk. So, you know, even little bits of his lie, such as they've found other immune people, she may realize that that's not right, because Marlene could have simply said, you know, your humanity's only hope.
That's very true. Yeah.
So that, you know, I think even then, I think there's something that suggests that she's uncomfortable with what he's saying in terms of whether she can fully believe it. And as you say, then she just opens up with her, with what happened with Riley. And that's to say, look, I'm opening up to you in the same way that you opened up to me before. Now, to follow up, is what you've just told me, like, are you sure that's true? And again, as I say, he doubles down on it, and I think she is then, you know, very suspicious.
Yeah. And I think she's saying that's it. What do you think, Chris?
I don't think she believes him. The way, I don't know why. I don't think Marlene said anything. I think it's just Joel's not that good of a liar.
Yeah.
And I think the sure is, I know you're lying to me. And then it's the question mark of what's next. I think that's left with us lingering until season 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In that, does she accept the lie for the greater good, in that the greater good being their relationship? I think the way that they set this up, that Ellie needed the immunity to mean something, and it no longer means something. And I think that's the issue where she will face in Jamestown, which is she's not special. Her life, the death, the destruction has meant nothing and been for nothing. And if she ever finds out that Joel took that away from her, then that's your crux of your character drama for next season, or in season 3, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, what happens when the one thing that made you special is taken away, and not by your choice.
Yeah.
And I think the whole point of sure is, it's not a you're lying, it's not an okay. It's closer to I don't believe you, but it can be taken as okay.
Okay,
but I think it's just not. It's not directly saying sure, let's move on. It's not saying I don't. It's just in the spectrum of that, where in the middle is like I'm not sure. It's sure is just closer to I don't believe you.
Yeah.
Okay, the delivery in the scene is closer to.
Interesting.
And it's an interesting place to leave it. It's meant to induce these types of conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the whole point. Yeah.
It is, absolutely. And 7 years from how that game ended until players got to hear what happened in part 2 of The Last of Us. So hopefully we don't have to wait 7 years for the second season of The Last of Us to see how that plays out in the relationship between.
What's the
between
time jump in the game?
Not long. Not long.
It's not like it's like a 2-3 year kind of job.
Yeah. They've been living in Jamestown a few years. Have I been saying Jamestown the whole time? I meant Jackson, where Tommy lives. That's obviously where they're going to. Sorry, I think there is a town called Jamestown in the US, but that's not where they live. They live in Jackson. So yes, they have been in Jackson a few years as part 2 starts. So, I again, can't 100% confirm, haven't gone back to part 2 in a while, so this is not a spoiler for the second game, because I'm not 100% sure about how that game starts. What I do know is this is exactly how the game ends, and we waited 7 years to get to the second game, so hopefully we're not going to have to waste that long for the second season of the show.
No.
I wonder if I should just put everybody on the spot. Would you have made the same choice as Joel? As our final thing, because I think everybody probably has a decision that they would make in this circumstance. Would you have made the same choice as Joel?
I don't have the same shooting skills as Joel, so there's no way I could have acted on it in the way that he does.
True. Yes. Yeah, me too.
Simple as that.
Me too. I would make the same choice if I was Joel in this situation. There you go. I'd say that.
I think I would go about it with words, not with guns. I mean, I think to an extent, Joel's choice is the right one, but you've got to be able to say Ellie is the one that needs to be given the choice here.
Yeah.
I don't think that she can, willingly of her own agency decide that she will sacrifice herself.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if I was Joel, I probably wouldn't have lied afterwards. If I had got the gun skills to do what he did and so on.
Right.
But I think, at the end of the day, he's put himself now in a really difficult position, I guess. With Ellie.
Yeah. And I don't think it's the right choice that Joel makes here. I think it's the same choice I would make, but it's not the right choice. I think Marlene's known Ellie all of her life and still made the choice to sacrifice her for the greater good. But I think I'd probably make the same choice as Joe. What about yourself, Chris?
I honestly don't know. The part of me says I'd make the same decision as Joel because the damage is already done. And the world may never. It's the whole point of it. It's not a definitive, and there's no a part of that. Now, if I was to do it the other way, if I had the option, you then don't kill the doctor immediately.
Well, yeah.
You get them to wake her up, and you have a logical discussion with everyone. But that's a whole other ball game, a whole other game.
Yeah.
That's an alternate reality.
Yes, exactly.
But I think if it's a binary, would you leave or would you do what Joel does and get all the way to? I'd probably say I'd do what Joel does because I still don't believe one life is worth millions unless it's 100%. Or because also they know exactly how the child was made, how Ellie is made. So part of me also goes, you can just remake it now.
Except that would sacrifice every pregnant mother.
Yeah, but the mothers would have that choice. They would sign up for clinical trials and make that decision themselves.
Right.
Of people just slowly getting big.
Okay, you're going
parts.
way off the reservation there.
This is why I'm never going to be in control of people. Never in control.
It's supposed to be a difficult decision. It is, but a good conversation. I'm sure lots of people were having that conversation for the first time after watching the show the other night on Sunday night, and I'm sure, as I know, millions of people were having that conversation for the last 10 years after the first game. Good stuff. Any notes or points? Anything else we want to discuss about the episode?
The big one for me is I'm trying to decide whether I play part 2. Essentially, I'm nearly finished parts of my backlog, so the question is, will I play part 1 and then roll into part 2? But we'll see. We'll have to see. I don't know if I want to spoil it for myself. It's one of those.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I think if you're going to hold off on part 2, you're going to be holding off for quite a long time, especially if it's going to be 2 seasons.
Exactly.
Or 2 or 3
'Cause they'll
seasons.
probably film it back to back.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe. Rumor has it that there's an opportunity for them to start filming on the second season this year. So it will be a while, of course, before we get the second season. But rumor has it that it may start filming this year. So that would be cool. I think I'm going to jump into part 2 in the break after this. One other little note that I just thought was quite nice. Laura Bailey, also a voice actor from Critical Role, has a very, very small cameo in this episode. She plays the nurse that isn't killed by Joel in his rampage. She's in the operating theatre with Ellie. So another voice actor getting a cameo in this episode.
Excellent stuff.
And interestingly, she also voiced the nurse in The Last of Us Part 1, the game. So she actually provided the voice for there because she was a very, very well known voice actor. Which I think Neil Druckmann was talking about it, saying that once he heard her voice, he wanted to give her a bigger part in a future game with Naughty Dog. So I like that.
Excellent.
I like that.
Final note from me is that in a spoiler cast that I have not fully listened to yet with Neil Druckmann, with the Kind of Funny game / Kind of Funny team, he confirmed that at one point there was a prequel in the works about Ellie's mom, which would have been also Ashley Johnson playing it. That's where the storyline came from for this kind of cold open, which is they were going to do, and it actually wasn't going to be done by Naughty Dog. It was being run or potentially by a separate company, non-Naughty Dog company, which is very interesting for video game business reasons. But anyway, but overall, just interesting that this cold open came about. Basically, they had already done some preliminary kind of ideation on this, on what it could be. Yeah,
he'd written the story, and when he shared it with Craig Mazin, Craig Mazin apparently went, "Yeah, that's definitely going in the show." so no problem with that. That's definitely being developed as a part of this season. So good stuff. Last note I have is just because I think it is really awesome that that is actually a real giraffe that Ellie and Joel are interacting with.
Stupid internet and Twitter people.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because you can see the filming of it, and there's a behind the scenes doc that was released. You can see the filming with the giraffe, and of course, They didn't put the giraffe out in an apocalyptic world. Of course, all of that is CGI. And when you put a real animal on a blue screen, things can look a bit weird. And that's probably what happened. People were looking at it going, there's no way they got a real giraffe. So the giraffe must be CGI. Yeah. But it's not. Everything around the giraffe is CGI. But it looks, it's very cool that the actual moment seeing Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal with the real life, giraffe. I think they spent a few days filming just to get those very short scenes. So very cool.
I absolutely love this because this broke Twitter for a while, because there was a large contingent of people who can always tell. Mm-hmm. Now, this is whether it's about trans people or apparently CGI.
Yeah.
They can always tell, quote unquote, and they got this so wrong. Yeah. So wrong. So there's literally this just army of people going, oh my God, it's so fake, it's so CGI, it's the worst CGI in the world. That animal, like, look at that tongue, it's just not real. And then within, I'd say about a couple of hours, people are like, here's the photo, here's the blue screen, here's the real giraffe. And they're like, silence. It's like crickets just come in after. So,
of course,
I love when certain people that can always tell get owned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. That's all my notes on the episode. Anything else you guys want to talk about?
No notes from me.
Nothing from me. So then that can only mean one thing. It is time to wrap it up. Derek, I think pretty much I know exactly where you're going to go with this, but what is your final thoughts and opinions on The Last of Us episode 9? And if you want to sprinkle in some thoughts on the season as a whole.
Talk about sticking the landing. This absolutely nailed all the emotional moments for me, and that choice that Joel makes, the conversation around it, even while sprinkling in even more information than I had the first time I played this story. The first time I heard about the story, I didn't know anything about the relationship really between Anna and Marlene, the connection between them, the fact that Marlene has been looking over Ellie for 14 years. While not as close as Joel, she is aware of her. This is her best friend's child as well. So having that decision at the end from Joel now has even more context because of the decision that Marlene makes. So I love that. I love how they've added to this and expanded on it. Thought it was wonderful having Ashley Johnson in here at the beginning of the episode as well. This is one of the best shows I've seen, and they have nailed the ending for it. I really, really enjoyed what they've delivered in this first season. I'm really trustful now of what Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann will deliver for season 2. I'm really excited to see what they do with that second story. And I think I can place a lot of hope in them that they'll do the right thing and tell a great story with the second season. I'm really looking forward to it.
Great stuff. Jonas, what is your final opinion and thoughts on episode 9? And if you want to sprinkle in, do some Salt Bay on thoughts on the season as a whole.
I really, really enjoyed this episode. I give it 4.5 jolly giraffes out of 5. Yeah, I thought it was really good. I love the opening, just that little bit of exposition, that context. I think just building up to that choice that Joel has, just the relationship that, after the difficult time at Lakeside for Ellie, and Joel, that kind of switch between the two of them, but how that is in effect almost immediately undermined by what Joel's choice is and the subsequent lie that he tells her.
Yeah.
So I really thought this was excellent. I think overall the season's just been phenomenal. It's really had so many great moments and so many fantastic sort of emotional beats to it. So I've really absolutely loved this season 1 of The Last of Us, and for me this episode 4.5 jolly giraffes out of 5. Chris, what about yourself? What did you think of episode 9 of The Last of Us?
As someone who hadn't kind of played much of the game and definitely never completed it, knew kind of stories about how it went, how it kind of closed, and the discussions and the drama about it when it came out 10 plus years ago. I I was interested to see how I would feel towards the end of this. I think as a season, damn near perfect. Like, brilliant storytelling, beat to beat. The actors were chosen correctly. They expand, as you said, Derek, they expanded where they felt they should make additions, which gave the story even greater. Like I said, like, again, the Frank and Bill episode is still one of the greatest pieces of TV I've seen this year and probably in the last couple of years. This ending felt slightly rushed, but I understand why. Because, again, I'm assuming that skyscraper shootout probably lasts ages in the game. Like, you're working your way up level. Like, it feels fast because I think didn't want it to end versus I could specifically call out points where I'm like, they should have expanded that and made more. I think it's a good story that deserves to be told. And I think it was told in the right way. I think it was just felt fast, if that makes sense. It felt like everything was tied up very quickly in 42 minutes when they have shown before that they can take a full hour if they wanted it. But I can't point to a note and go, that's where you should have extended out the conversation.
Exactly.
I want to know more. Like, that's on them. They make a choice. And I think still the season was fantastic. We talked about Game of Thrones and Succession and other big HBO stories that for years have grown with the audience, grown with their viewerships. This, like Watchmen, within one season was huge. This is getting the part 2, part 3, well, season 2, season 3, or part 2, whatever way they do it, who knows?
Yeah.
Time will tell. But for now, it was fantastic. And it's left on you can call it an ambiguous cliffhanger. Sure. Yeah. That's a way to end it. But overall, just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Good stuff. I think the only thing I'd say is you're right. The shootout that happens in the hospital takes days because it's very difficult. But realistically, I think in game time, it's probably about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe.
Well, that's it. And I mean,
it's probably about the same length as the TV show.
And I think the choice that they made in how to shoot that for the TV show was really good.
Yeah.
You know? Yes, it was quick, but because they slowed it down, made it that kind of, I mean, even just with Pedro Pascal sort of kicking the empty shell cases, I thought it was really well done, you know, and it just kind of slowed the time, but got through a bit which ultimately should be quick, you know, because otherwise, you can have even a 10-minute shootout in that is just going to be like, what's going on here? So I thought the choices that they made were really good.
Absolutely. Little nods to the Terminator in there, but also showing the brutality of him, you know, as I mentioned earlier on, him shooting people that were putting down their guns. He takes his knife out to stab a guy after killing him, you know, after shooting him to make sure he's dead. You know, he is absolutely taking out every single person that is in the way. And I do think the kicking of the bullets as they're coming, I think that's a little nod to Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator. Seeing the bullet casings bounce on the ground as he walks through this place. I think it was a little touch there.
Great stuff. We have come to the end of our discussion for this episode of the season, so that can only mean one thing. It's time to head to the pub. Gentlemen, take us off to the end of the world, or the world's end, for the pub quiz for this episode.
Yes, fellow quizzers, fellow survivors. Question 9 for The World's End, The Last of Us pub quiz. What word game does Joel find as he scavenges for supplies on the outskirts of Salt Lake City?
I've never played this word game.
I have.
Have you?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think I've ever played it, but a very well known one.
Yes, and I believe Chris may have spoiled it during the course of the podcast.
I think you might, but there's 9 questions to answer, John, some with multiple parts throughout the season. So do you want to give this question one more time?
I will. Question 9 for episode 9 of The Last of Us. What word game does Joel find as he scavenges for supplies on the outskirts of Salt Lake City? fellow quizzers, fellow survivors, please, it is that moment where you can send in all 9 answers to the pub quiz to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. So get those in to be in with a chance to avail of The Last of Us Part 1 game for PlayStation 5 or for PC. And of course, if you're not a gamer, well then we will look to provide some other Last of Us type goodies as well. A basket of mushrooms, as I said before.
It won't be a basket of mushrooms, but it will be something else related to The Last of Us for you to enjoy.
A selection of mushrooms.
I guarantee we won't be able to ship mushrooms from Ireland to anywhere else in the world. So I promise it'll be something else related to The Last of Us. Yeah, just email in those answers to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. We'll be recording a wrap-up podcast for The Last of Us in a couple of weeks' time. So that's where we will announce the winner of The Last of Us Part 1 on PC or PS5. Thanks so much to everybody who's entered the competition, everybody who's hopefully been enjoying The Last of Us World's End pub quiz so far this season. Looking forward to hearing your answers. Good stuff. Let's get on to some feedback. First up, we have some email feedback in. We got an email in from Sam who says, "Morning, guys. I hope I've got this in time for the episode. What can I say about this series other than wow, it was so good, very realistic, very character driven, well acted and beautifully shot. I somehow managed to relate to it. Not sure how that works. As someone who played the game when it very first came out, I can remember very little of the game. Every now and then I get a nostalgic feeling like when you watch an old TV show. You can't remember what happened, just how it made you feel. Although I do remember that last bit in the hospital taking me a lot longer, like 2 days longer.
Yes.
It's a shame that Joel didn't come clean to Ellie at the end. I do get it that that's potential fallout story arc between the pair of them for season 2. Episode 9, what a way to start, having the actress who played Ellie in the game be Ellie's mom. I loved that. For me, that shows how good the casting was, as they almost looked like they could be related. Ellie's vacant stare at the start of the episode made me want to hug her. So well portrayed. Bella has a massive future. I loved how paternal Joel had become of Ellie over the series, the whole "you're like my daughter but not," and the heart-to-heart when they sat down was a lovely unspoken way of saying I love you. 2 of my favourite Joel moments were the bit with the sniper rifle, where he didn't want to shoot the guy, but then ended off doing it anyway, and the "I've got you, baby girl." I don't have a favourite Ellie moment. It was all amazing. My favourite episode was the sniper episode, episode 6, and of course episode 8 as well last week. Love the podcast, guys. Keep up the good work. What are you watching next? Love and mushrooms from Sam. Thanks so much, Sam. We're currently still podcasting about 2 of the shows, of course, Star Trek Picard and Star Wars The Bad Batch. And there's been lots of mixing and shaking up in the other shows that we're going to be covering this year. So we don't have many release dates of stuff that's coming up.
That's true.
What we do know is we'll be covering The Boys season 4 this year. We'll be covering the spin-off show of that as well, both available on Prime Video. We know the 3rd season The Witcher is coming out this summer as well. So we'll most likely be covering that in the summer. And we know on the Marvel side, we know we'll be covering Secret Invasion, which is due later this year at some point as well.
Invincible is out. Is it this year as well? Not that I was on that for the first season.
Yeah, the announcement for Invincible said it is coming some point in 2023, and it could just be the first episode released on December 31st this year, and that would still mean they were right about their announcement.
Yeah.
So
at some point, and they very specifically called out some point.
Underline some point in 23. So lots and lots of stuff. We're not 100% sure of when exactly we'll be covering things, only because release dates haven't been put out there yet for those shows. So hopefully we'll get some more release dates coming up, Sam.
Yes.
But who knows? Probably 3 days from now, they're just going to drop every single one. And it's all going to be in the same week. Like every show starts in the same week.
Given how many shows are getting cancelled from streaming services at the moment, my feeling is they're going to spread these out and make sure they're not all happening at the same time, so they get as many eyeballs on them as possible. For every single streaming service, I would say, is making that plan at the moment.
Great stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think the way this episode started was just really, really cool, that it was Ashley Johnson that was playing Ellie's mum there. Yeah, I love that too. And I think you're so right. I think Bella Ramsey has a massive future. I mean, just the 2 things I'm aware of her being involved in, which is this and effectively Game of Thrones. She really made her mark. When you think about it, certainly from Game of Thrones when she was so young, everyone was talking about her. She really filled the hall at Winterfell. So, good stuff.
Yeah, thanks, man. I think the realism that you talk about, it's so realistic and that you relate to it, but you're not sure why. I think it's the realism. It's the character driven and the characters being very realistic. Like, if the end of the apocalypse happens, it's going to be like this. It's not. There's a darker tone to it than some of the more. I'm not saying Walking Dead is not darker, because it definitely has had that, but some of this seems a bit more, sometimes more realistic than some of the more shambling Walking Dead. Again, going by what I've watched of the two, I know there's a lot.
It's too difficult, and the only reason I push back on it, I know lots and lots of people compare the shows, but the only reason I push back on it, you're comparing 12 seasons versus 9 episodes. Exactly. Let's see if The Last of Us could make as many episodes as The Walking Dead and be as good as that. That's the only reason I push back, but I've loved The Last of Us, and I will say exactly what you're saying, Chris, that I agree with, is what they've done here is once you accept the central premise here that the world has ended, and out there in the distance, in the background, mushroom monsters are coming to kill you if you go to the wrong place. Once you've accepted that, the characters are really realistically written. That's what I'd say. So they've really built their show on, if you accept the premise, now we're going to tell a real story of humans in this environment. So they've done a great job of that. Great stuff. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Heading on over to our Facebook feedback. First up, David Mr. Writer says, I start by saying I haven't played the game, so I had no expectations or reference point on how it would play out here. Being a shorter episode, I think it snuck up on me on how fast it ended, and I got to say this was very mid. I wasn't expecting fireworks, but at least a sparkler. Her origin was cool. Those fungus do travel fast apparently from mother to umbilical cord to child. The chemistry between Joel and Ellie was way off. Perfectly executed by the actors, and the tension was through the roof. It was uncomfortable for the viewer because part of you wanted him to deal with the elephant in the room, but the other part was saying, let's just sweep it under the rug. Again, perfectly executed by the actors. The Rambo scene was pretty cool. He has a kneecap fetish because it's all he goes for. I'm not sure how I feel about Marlene getting executed either. I have to remind myself that he's an anti-hero and not a good guy. I guess it also bothered me about the big 180 he makes and going away from the mission to possibly save millions. I completely understand he's overcompensating for not being able to protect her from the cannibal diddler, but it was such a stray from his usual arc. But I understand why. He was overcompensating in all episodes, actually. Reminds me of when you tell a partner that they talk too much, so they decide to be petty and refuse to talk to you. So now you have to try and chat them up to get them back to talking again. That was Joel all episode. Overall, though, it's getting a 3 out of 5. It was almost as bad as Arya killing the Night King. That level of underwhelming after a pretty big build-up. After finally finishing the Walking Dead series finale, I guess I expected more from the season finale because so far it's been the better product. Side note, I'm the only one who got annoyed at the Firefly soldier in the beginning who didn't cover Ellie's ears when Marlene told him to. Something about the gunshot and baby Ellie crying because of the other Firefly didn't cover her ears. It really irked me. I don't know what I expected. Thanks, David. Do you know, I know what you mean, and I know Chris mentioned it around the gunshot with baby Ellie, but, you know, guns allowed. So I think even with that, because I actually thought the dramatic element of the baby screaming out in the hall after effectively its mother had just been shot by her, you know, one of her oldest friends, I thought was quite sort of theatrical, really. So I thought it was actually quite good, and I'm just wondering to what extent he could put his hands over his ears when one of them is supporting. So I think he tried, but I'm guessing the gun is also pretty loud.
Oh, definitely. But I think a lot of people have actually pointed this out as well. It's like you were told to do one thing and you didn't do it. You can clearly see that the soldier doesn't have his hands anywhere near the ears. My pushback on it is kind of, he was also just handed a baby a second ago and he's carrying a torch and a gun and he's kind of going, what the hell is happening? Don't really know what's going on. So I think he may have just failed because he was so shocked at what's just happened.
And one of those hands is under the baby, supporting it. So, I guess he should have just gone downstairs immediately. But also the gun was loud. Anyway, I thought the baby screaming out was kind of like, no!
Exactly. Yeah.
But, kind of thing, I guess.
How did it go again? Okay, interesting.
You tell him,
I guess.
Yeah.
You do your best baby impression then.
I don't need to, because thank you so much, David. Yep. This really irked me too, with this kind of piece, but I think, as even Derek said, it's multiple people have called it out. But thanks for your feedback. I guess I think most of us are a bit higher on it and less mid on it, but I understand. Look, it's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's the thing. Like, as long as the majority landed for you, that's kind of the major point.
Yeah. I have to say, I do kind of agree. The fungi do travel very fast.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that is possible.
They're almost like runners.
No, but I mean, they travel fast.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
They do.
I think that's more irking to me.
Oh, okay.
Do you know, I actually thought that Anna had been bitten before coming to the house. I thought that she was running away from the infected and then arrived at the house, and then the infected happened to come into the room, because she seemed to be running to get there. And that was clearly a prearranged meeting that she had with Marlene, because Marlene said she turned up late. So I thought she was already running away from an infected that may have already bitten her. So the cordyceps hadn't traveled that fast. It was that she hadn't turned before the baby was born. But you're probably right. I think the infected is on top of her for quite a while in that attack. So she may have gotten the opportunity to be bitten during that time. So yeah.
Yeah. But that sounds plausible as well.
Yeah. Never know. But again, we probably won't find any more details out about about how she actually died either.
The origin is over.
Yeah, exactly.
Great stuff. Thanks, David. Next up, we have some feedback from Alex Baelish, who had this to say. Such a giant episode last night. It was hard to keep it together. Afterwards, the relationship with Joel and Ellie is so unique, but so amazing. All I could think about is my daughter and what you would do for life.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Alex. Don't have that yet, but a lot of people I have heard say that anyone who has kids basically have kind of echoed what you were echoing.
Yeah, and I do too, Alex. Even though I don't have kids, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. Next up, Amanda Snow had this to say. This show is so frustrating. Why must they introduce such interesting characters with great actors, then kill them off and leave us with the worst ones, and so many MacGuffins? Not quite sure which MacGuffins, but I will happily discuss it if you want to send us more feedback in. Overall, though, I actually think, like, if you're talking about Marlene, that was always going to be the way, in my opinion. Like, it had to be that way. And then the same for the origin of, obviously, Ellie and a few of that. So I think you're left with Joel and Ellie because, again, it's realistic. You're not always going to have the nicest people surviving. Mm-hmm. You're going to have these people who aren't the nicest people in the world, i.e. the Joels. They are the people that have survived in this post-apocalyptic world.
Yeah.
The nice person finishes last. Well, most likely in this way, the nice person got bit by the cordyceps and is no longer with us.
In fairness, I should have been clearer. Amanda's comment was on the spoiler post that we put up on Facebook, which had an image from each episode of the last 8 episodes of the season so far. And yes, a massive amount of fantastic, interesting characters introduced in the show, and with great actors behind them who've been killed throughout the series. Those were the major moments throughout the season so far. So totally understand that, Amanda. But I suppose this show was never going to be a long running TV show telling the story of a massive group of characters. We kind of learned that earlier on in the season, so I kind of love that they've surrounded them by great actors playing small roles that didn't last for a very long time. Attracting really good actors to play characters that only last one episode, kind of made it really special. It added something really extra to the characters that we got this season, having great actors behind them. While I understand if you're comparing it against a long running show where you see the same actors come back week after week, a big cast of characters, it's very different, to those kind of shows. But our main cast here are Joel and Ellie. So yeah.
Good stuff. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda. David Mr. Writer is back again with an additional question on top of his feedback. He says, one for John and Chris. How's this for a nutty idea? How would you have felt about reversing the last 2 episodes? So episode 9 goes where episode 8 does. There's the attack in the hospital, Joel killing all of the fireflies. And then the episode ends with Ellie asking the question to swear, and he does. And you can see the trust is broken. And then episode 8, where the two of them get split apart and Ellie has to take out David, is the finale of the season. And it goes to black after Joel tells her, I've got you, baby girl. What would you think about flipping that order for the episodes?
It's an interesting approach. I think what you lose slightly is the driving factor of this episode, which was the emotional impact Joel had on Ellie nearly dying and being pulled away, and kind of him waking up to her after she had saved him, her not being there and her being taken, and him, that final character-based shift of Joel to understand that she is the surrogate or replacement, if you will, daughter, Sarah. And he sees her, or he feels for her as much as he did for Sarah. Mm-hmm. In different ways, and they're both unique, as he keeps calling out. But they're both very different, but they're very similar. And I think that's, so I don't think it would work quite the way. And also, it leaves us on a different style of kind of cliffhanger, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It leaves us in a different way. This is somewhat of a, she doesn't believe him, because you would also have to play off that part of last episode 8 into episode 9 where, well, what does she do with that not believing? At least now we know they're about to go into the town with Tommy and the rest of them and potentially live out their lives, mm-hmm. while that eats away at her. So I think it's a nice idea. I think it's just, I prefer the way it plays here, but it's definitely a nutty idea, which I enjoy.
So yeah, I think that's pretty good. I guess the intention for Neil Druckmann was to have that savior moment, and in a sense, this relationship that has been sort of on edge all the way through come to something a bit more sort of softer and gentler, only for it to then be ripped open again, mm-hmm. with the events of episode 9. So I guess it plays with that, but like you say, it's both situations, whilst they would still have them going back to the brothers' camp, it's just, where's the relationship? And I guess, mm-hmm. if there's a fracturing in episode 8, what Joel does for her in episode 9 would possibly bring them back together again. So yeah. I guess it's for what the future is, which was probably always the intention with there being the episode, part 2 of the game, and to explore what happens in that, which of course is, kind of probably a little different than people would think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, no, good stuff, David.
Yeah, I'm not too sure whether Joel makes the same decision he did in episode 9 if episode 8 hadn't happened. I think he makes that decision because their relationship has built, yeah. On what she's gone through as well as the time they've spent together. Yeah. So,
but all these theories and just these ideas, it's good to hear.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, David. Angie Arhus has some feedback. She says, I kind of agree that I didn't know what to expect in the finale, not having played the game. They sure kept me guessing, and I didn't see Joel lying to Ellie and dooming all of humanity. I will say I wasn't originally going to watch this show, thinking it was yet another zombie apocalypse type show. However, when I saw Craig Mazin was involved and TVPI were podcasting on it, I thought I'd better not miss out. I am so glad I did watch the show. Episode 3 was worth the entire season alone, and episode 5 was one of the scariest things I've seen in a while. Loved it all. We already knew Craig Mazin was a master storyteller, and I think the show has driven Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey into the top stratosphere of acting. And I wanted to say, if there is a TVPI event in Dublin for the 1000th podcast, I'll be there for it. Thanks again for another great podcast series. Thanks,
Woohoo!
Angie.
Good stuff, Angie.
Yeah, it'll be the 4 of us here in Dublin.
No, I think we
few
can slowly
more.
start bringing more and more and more people.
Yes.
There'll be a whole 4.
Should do it when Dublin Comic Con is on.
Yeah, that could work. 250 episodes to organise, John.
Oh no. Yeah.
That's on you guys. I'll do the rest of the. I'll do the rest of the podcast and stuff. You guys organise something for our 1000th episode. Brilliant! Thanks so much, everybody, for your feedback throughout the season so far. We do still have our wrap-up episode. If you want to send in any thoughts on the season as a whole once you finish watching it, email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. Spoiler posts up there for every episode that we've recorded about The Last of Us. But of course, remember, you can enter the Last of Us World's End pub quiz by using that same address as well for your 9 answers to the pub quiz questions. Looking forward to talking to you again one final time about The Last of Us in a couple of weeks' time.
Yes, thank you so much for staying with us. Don't forget, we're also covering, as Derek has already said, covering The Bad Batch each and every week. We've got a couple more episodes left on that. And we are over in the Star Trekking across the universe with the final season of Star Trek Picard Season 3. Yes, and we're kind of podcasting that in each and every episode, and it's definitely an interesting one. If you like The Next Generation, make sure you're there. Make sure you're following along. You don't have too much to catch up on, and you can do it now quite easily.
Yeah, so thanks so much, fellow survivors, for joining us for this episode of The Last of Us. But in the meantime, before we come back with our wrap-up episode, keep watching, keep listening, and keep surviving, keep trekking, keep being bad, you name it. You keep doing it. Bye.
Bye.